Hello, baseball fans of the New York variety. Welcome into Concrete Jungle, a New York baseball podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. Paul Russo and Kyle Evans here with you, and we are officially at the end of the New York baseball season, but we'll still be hanging out with everybody through the postseason, but more on that here in a little bit. Both teams wrap up, Yankees and Mets, in different fashions over the weekend, and a couple headlines to discuss for both teams, but going to be one of our shorter episodes. We'll get in and out here. Programming note, we'll remind everybody at the end here, but podcast this week will shift Monday and today, obviously, and Friday as opposed to Monday and Thursday due to a couple scheduling conflicts. So be on the lookout for that on Friday afternoon. But enough of that. Kyle, good to see you. How was your weekend?
It was good. I watched a lot of interesting games other than the Yankees. Just glad the New York teams are done. Tired of losing baseball. I'm sure we'll get into it more later, but I think I'm going to become a big Marlins fan for this postseason.
Okay.
At least to start off with. I don't expect them to go far, but yeah, I've been trying to figure out who I'm going to root for, and I'm excited to watch the games starting tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll obviously get into that and look forward to that and everything. But this is a very intriguing, not to give too much away here for really our back end of this episode, but there's some intriguing matchups here this postseason. Obviously, the wild card round getting going, and we'll talk about that. But I'm intrigued by the Marlins. I can see why, but I'm not going to give away who I'm leaning with just yet. I don't think so. Anyway, enough of that. Quick thank you to our sponsors of today's program, like Generations Bank. Generations Bank has been serving the financial needs of the Finger Lakes region since 1870. Generations combines the best of modern banking with dedication to our local communities. Whether you're looking for a checking account, CDs, home improvement loan, you name it, we have what you need. We are committed to serving and giving back to our communities. Visit us online at mygenbank.com. Generations Bank, member FDIC, an equal housing lender, and Go Net Speed. The future of connection is here, and it's fiber. Made for how we live and work today, Go Net Speed fiber is faster and stronger than anything out there. You can check availability in your area as well as plans and pricing at gonetspeed.com and get ready for fast and reliable fiber internet straight to your home. So, Kyle, let's start with the Yankees here. Lose the final series of the season in Kansas City, but in the process, clinch an above 500 above 500 winning percentage. That happened Thursday for the 31st straight season. It's one of those, like, I think in the moment, kind of like, well, bright spot, if you really want to count it that in this type of season. But I think more it just speaks to, I guess, I think longevity of just at least good performance in a franchise. I mean, it's kind of crazy thinking back on this. I mean, you have to go back, obviously, to 1993 and what was arguably one of, I wouldn't say the worst seasons in Yankee history. You had certain pieces there kind of getting it together for what was going to be the late 90s surge of the team. But when you look back on history, kind of even what we know now about 1994 and the strike-shortened season with the team to 95 to 96, obviously in that first World Series win of the late 90s run there, I think it's a decent feather in the hat still for a team, but obviously, given the expectations of this team in particular, the 2023 Yankees, and how it played out, it's a bittersweet milestone to have.
Yeah, for me, I'm not big with the stat just because this is the New York Yankees. I mean, they always have one of the highest payrolls. They're well known, of course, by everyone. Their history is so great. For me, it's expected. And if they didn't finish above 500 this season, even with how bad it was, that would be extremely disappointing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, this isn't, it's kind of weird, but, you think about some more recent Yankee times, whether 2016, a couple of teams before that, maybe 2008 kind of lingers a little bit, although that team team was still alive late-ish in the year. But, there have been moments where the streak has kind of come into jeopardy, but just hasn't. So, I mean, hell, we were talking about, I think, a spot in August there where it was projected out to be a below 500 season. And, look, frankly, a late season surge it did salvage it, right? I mean, but they're still the best team record-wise since the end of August. And, it's one of those things you have to kind of look at from a different, like you said, and I'm with you in this sense, Kyle. That's why I call it bittersweet, right? You have to look at it from the scope of just what this team specifically this year was supposed to do and what they just didn't accomplish, Transition to here with this point. Confusing, I'll call it situation. There's no other way I think around it, right? Where hitting coach Sean Casey, what we thought was asked to return for next year, turns out really hasn't. But it's one of those things where the regular season isn't even over yet, and there's been a ton of coaching carousel moments already going on through baseball, whether actual coaches in terms of bench, hitting, pitching, yada yada, to managerial, as we'll get to obviously as well. But I'm intrigued to see what Sean Casey would be like for a whole year as hitting coach. I don't know if there was enough of even marginal improvements the second half in my mind to maybe warrant him back another year, but I mean, it's tough to gauge a sample size by only 2.5, 3 months. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't mind him back, but I think the bigger question I have is if he does come back, and I'm viewing it from that scope at this point. What that tells me is the team's just going to run it back as is. That's what it more or less tells me. So that means, obviously Cashman, but obviously Boone and everybody else back. So I think that's where my main question and kind of wonder about where the team is headed kind of remains is if that's the plan, it sucks. I got to be honest with you. I think it sucks if that's the case then. Because that just tells me they're going to run it back, and I don't see, in the grand scheme of it, much more changing next year then.
Yeah, I definitely think Cashman and Boone will both be back. Boone said he hadn't been told anything yesterday after the game, but obviously, even if he has, he probably wouldn't be the one to announce it. He'd wait for, Cashman or Hal to announce that. But yeah, I do think Sean Casey will be back as well, even though he said, he hasn't been directly asked yet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think everyone's going to be returning. Obviously, Matt Blake will be back. I think the coaching staff's going to be the same. I think if we're going to see any changes, it's just the way they run the whole analytics thing, and maybe the medical staff side of things will have some changes. But as for the actual coaching staff, I don't see any changes, and I know that's frustrating. Even me, I'm frustrated to know that Cashman's probably coming back, but maybe there will be some major changes with the roster, as there should be. I mean, you can't just go out and re-sign your players like they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and make actual moves in free agency and trades.
Yeah.
So all we can do is hope and pray at this point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just more the optics of it than anything else, right? It's just, I think it would just back up what we feel like about Hal. Is if it's just a complete run back, then does he actually care about winning, like some of these reports have alluded to now that he does care, or is it just the assumptions that we've had now for the better part of a decade about him? Who knows? Well, I'll transition over to the Mets here. Buck Showalter not coming back next year as manager. Did match through the weekend, and the whole pregame press conference, I guess, as it really ended up being, I wasn't a fan of it. I wasn't a fan of the optics of it, one, but two, it really just a slap in the face to Buck Showalter, in my mind. more or less telling him resign or be fired in such a way with what I can only assume to be the few games left. I'm assuming he wasn't told Sunday morning when he got to the clubhouse. I'm assuming this was probably done a while, not a while, but a few days ago.
He said Saturday he got
Yeah.
called into his office.
So, I mean, I'm just not a fan of it. I don't think a lot of things this year are on him. There are certain elements that, yeah, you do have to take responsibility for as the manager of a big league team like that, right? But this is the biggest issue I have. I think all of this comes down on Billy Epler. This is clearly a track record with him, how he treats managers, how he treats players, how he goes about his business. He did the same thing, and I don't personally think he's all that great of a manager, but there's still, like I say, the human and respect element of it. He did the same thing to Mike Scioscia. Frankly, he was going to do the same thing with Joe Madden. I just don't see how, if you're David Stearns at this point, as the now official, director of baseball ops, president of baseball ops, and Steve Cohen, the owner, how you can go forward with Epler. And I get that Stearns is going to do his own things, and not to give too much away here because of what we'll be discussing in a couple minutes, Kyle, right? But all of a sudden, a name now linked with the Mets job next year because he's going to be a free agent manager at the end of this season is Craig Counsell with the Brewers. And he was Stearns' guy in Milwaukee that he brought in. And look, Counsell has even alluded to, he even said it in the celebration when the Brewers clinched a spot in the postseason, right? Like, I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. Like, let's enjoy this. And there's some indications to me that he's going to do that might be the move, right? But, like, I don't see how you can continue with Billy Epler. I think he's, frankly, a chooch. I think he's, and look, it's easy for us to sit here and say that type of stuff, but I just think he's a shit GM. I think he's a shit person. I'll go ahead and say it the way he's been treating people like this consistently now, that I wouldn't want him around my team, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think yesterday it was just weird how it all unfolded. Like, why did Steve Cohen and Billy Epler put out statements after Buck spoke to the media for his pregame availability? Like, why was Buck the one to, like, let everyone know? And there was some confusion at first. It sounded like Buck was stepping away. And then that's when Cohen put out his statement saying, like, no, we decided we want to part ways. It wasn't his decision
Right.
just to outright step away. So I just thought the way the timing went down yesterday was a little odd. I felt like Cohen and Epler should have at least been speaking to the media first, or at least putting out the statement before he spoke, just so there wasn't so much confusion at first.
Yeah.
But I always wondered anyway, though, if Showalter would have returned, just because of where the team is and where Buck is in his career. But it sounded like if they didn't part ways, he probably would have came back.
Yeah, I'll say it sounds like he wanted to come back.
So yeah, it's just kind of weird how it all went down. I'm a little surprised by it, and I don't really agree with it because what's really going to change? Taking Buck out and then bringing in a guy like Craig Counsell, like, I mean, does it really make that much of a difference?
Right.
It all comes down to the guys on the field, really.
And don't get me wrong, like I'm actually a big Craig Counsell guy. I think he's a really good manager, right? But I mean, if you're Craig Counsell, do you realistically want to go to the Mets right now? Like I don't know. You got a pretty good thing going in Milwaukee, all things considered. So I don't know. I just find, like I say, I find the whole weekend here, and look, I'll call another person out. It's the same thing I feel with the Giants. And look, I'm not a huge Gabe Kapler guy personally. I don't know if he's that good of a manager, but you can him, and the way you put out the statement as the Giants, the way you did it on Thursday with 3 games left. I mean, come on. Like, there's some elements of do better here. And I get it's a business, and I get whatever. Like, trust me, I'm more than well aware. And it's just one of those things where there's still the human decency portion of it.
They actually did it Friday afternoon before the final homestand.
Yeah.
It was like, because
Right.
it was a 10 o'clock start, so it was like 8 hours before the game.
Yeah.
And then they announced that they're firing him. Like, why not just wait until the season's
Right.
over and do it today? So I don't know. I just thought that was weird timing too. And I also don't really know, like, what's the point of it? I mean, the roster wasn't great this year. Obviously, he led them to what was it, 100 and how many wins did he lead them to a couple years ago?
Oh, it was 100,
106.
yeah. Even then, that team overachieved for a lot of the year this year. They did.
Yeah, they only had 53 losses that one year. I mean, yeah, this was a down year, and they were in a playoff spot in the beginning of September. So I guess you can kind of see why they did that. But again, he hasn't been there that long. I feel like a lot of times teams are just shipping managers and coaches in and out so much when really what's going to change with a new one. The Giants still follow analytics. They're going to bring in somebody that's still going to follow analytics. So it's just like another voice.
Which is the funny part to me because the link to this, and it sounds like it's not going to actually happen, but Bob Melvin, who he does believe in analytics, but he's a bit of an old school guy who's going to do his own thing at the end of the day, no matter what, in terms of decision making, right? Was the one link there. So I don't know. One last thing before we move on to some postseason talk, Kyle. The suspended game from Thursday involving the Marlins that was going to be played and now isn't going to be played. Just what a weird situation again. The Mets had a couple of these grounds crew issues, meets whatever else decision-making issues throughout the week this past week involving the Marlins, even involving the Phillies over the weekend as well. What did you make of it? Because I was left confused, especially since the Marlins couldn't move anywhere in the postseason once they clinched, right? And even the Mets, I mean, I looked on the website today, you looked on the website today, and even though it was a decision made yesterday that they weren't going to play, still had it listed as they were playing up until a few hours ago even.
My thoughts on it is Thursday night. I'm not even a Mets fan, of course. And I don't get what the grounds crew was doing, why they made the decision to just put the tarp on the field when they knew how much rain was coming in, and you had 2 outs in the top of the ninth,
right?
And you couldn't get that final out and then get through the bottom of the ninth, and then you think that you're going to have a chance to play, which there was a time. It was weird because the forecast didn't say it was ever going to let up, where they could have. You saw the videos. I saw you reposting
there was a one. Yeah,
they could have quickly went out, grabbed the tarp. They actually did pull the tarp off, but they were just still on the phones, messing around, when they could have just got this little window in to finish up what would have probably only been 20 minutes left of game, unless the Mets somehow tied it. But with David Robertson probably closing it out, they probably weren't going to tie it. But yeah, I don't get the whole grounds crew, the Mets thing, and you understand why Schumacher was so upset with everything, just the way everything unfolded. And that was such a big game for them, and it just seemed like the Mets were kind of just being, like, they didn't really care what happened. They were just kind of nonchalant, whatever, we can finish it Monday. And that's why you saw the Marlins so upset. And thankfully for them, they don't need to come back to New York for, again, what would probably be 20 minutes of game action.
Yeah, not even potentially, right? 2 outs in the top of the ninth. And the way games played this year probably was about 5 minutes of game action. So, yeah. All right, speaking of the Marlins, postseason picture before we get out of here, Kyle. Wild card week, as it is now more or less, is upon us. So for those who maybe don't know fully, wild card is now a best of 3 series, 4 total series, 2 in each league this year. So in the AL, the 3rd-seeded Minnesota Twins will be hosting the 6th-seeded Toronto Blue Jays. In the other series in the AL, the 4th-seeded Tampa Bay Rays hosting the 5th-seeded Texas Rangers. In the NL, the 3rd-seeded Milwaukee Brewers host the 6th-seeded Arizona Diamondbacks, and the 4th-seeded Philadelphia Phillies host the 5th-seeded Miami Marlins. And all these games will be played same day as each, at 4 different staggered times, double-barreled. So it'll be really interesting kind of see there. And what's interesting is these games on Tuesday, Wednesday, and possibly Thursday, Game 3 if needed, will be at the same time on the same station as well. So for the Rays-Rangers series, that's a 3:08 first pitch on ABC. For the Twins-Blue Jays, 4:38 first pitch on ESPN. For the Brewers and Diamondbacks, it's a 7:08 first pitch on ESPN2. And then Phillies-Marlins, 8:08 first pitch on ESPN. So, I kind of actually, I would prefer maybe having different start times for each game, for each series, just to get in different windows and stuff like that. But I do like the uniformity of it, as opposed to just kind of maybe being spots everywhere and stuff like that. So, just a couple quick hits on each series here before we get out of here, Kyle, and prediction as well, maybe. Your thoughts on Toronto, Minnesota initially here? My thoughts, I think Toronto's going to win the series. I just think they're the better team collectively. Now, I could see, honestly, Minnesota probably beat them just the way Toronto down the stretch was very flip-floppy and not great at certain spots. But I just think, Minnesota won a very weak division, and they themselves showed a lot of different signs at certain points of maybe not being all that great anyway. So I'm going to go Toronto there.
Yeah, I actually truly believe the Twins win the series. And it's not just because, of course, I don't like the Blue Jays because I'm being in the AL East. I don't know. I just think, if you remember, the Twins have been awful in their last, 16 postseason games.
Very true.
So I think this is the year, they're at home to start, right? They're the 3 seed. Yeah, so I just feel like at home, they're just going to take care of business and win their first playoff series. And I don't even know the exact year, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Give me the Twins in that one.
The other AL series that I mentioned already, Rays and Rangers. And this one is an interesting one. If each team had a full deck, I think I'd lean Rays, and I don't want to make it sound like I think the Rangers are exactly that much better than the Rays, especially on the pitching front. But as we know in the postseason, pitching makes a world of difference. It's the difference. And although the Rangers themselves are also technically missing a piece or two, I just think they have numerically more bullets pitching-wise than Tampa to make up for probably what is either roughly the same or maybe slight edge to Tampa on offense. But I'm going to go with the Rangers there. But, I think that certainly is going to go 3 games and go through Thursday in that series. But I'm going Texas over Tampa.
Yeah, this Rays team, offensively especially, but even pitching, they've lost a lot of people. But, I mean, no Jose Siri, no Luke Raley, no Brandon Lau. I mean, those are some big key pieces that have produced all year that they don't have. So I'm going to say the Rangers win this series, and I'm going to be happy about that because I respect the Blue Jays more than the Rays. I can't stand the Rays. So, yeah, let's go Rangers in that one.
In the NL, let's go with the Marlins and Phillies first, Kyle, since you're high on the Marlins. And I'm actually with you at least for
Well,
I'm with you though. I'm with you though for this Phillies series at least. I really do believe that.
I just like the way the Marlins been playing, and everyone counts them out, and they're just such a resilient team. They fight back all the time. I like Skip. I do like the Phillies though. If the Phillies went on and won, I wouldn't care. I think I'm gonna root for the Marlins, and I don't think the Marlins win, unfortunately.
I think they beat the Phillies though. I legitimately do.
so.
I think you talk about the Phillies. And I know Miami's not exactly that much further up or down the road or whatever in this situation, however you want to call it, but Miami's just been more consistent this year, in my mind. You know what you're going to get with them. There's no way around it, right? You just know what you're going to get with them. I can't say the same thing about the Phillies day in and day out sometimes.
Marlins bullpen worries me.
Yeah, I don't blame them. It's not like the Phillies bullpen's actually that great either outside of Kimbrel this year, It's one of those things.
And I do think that's a better matchup for the Braves in the next round.
Definitely.
So actually, it would kind of suck if the Marlins won because then it's basically a free ride for the Braves to go back to the NLCS. So
now the other series in the NL, Kyle, the Diamondbacks and Brewers.
That's interesting.
They have this series contains my pick for the World Series winner as it stands right now.
You think the Diamondbacks are going?
The Brewers.
Whoa.
The Brewers pitching is. They're on all cylinders right now at the right time.
Please don't let Josh Donaldson in the World Series.
I think he can't play anyway.
Well,
he wasn't on the roster in time.
He'll still be on the bench.
That's fair, I guess. But look, I just think Milwaukee's got a really good package. I think they might be the only ones in my mind in the NL that could actually kind of take on the Braves, and they just played a few weeks ago even, and the Brewers were pretty good against them. But I just think Milwaukee's pitching. We talk about the pitching, right? And don't get me wrong, the Diamondbacks' pitching is great. They're going to have Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen for sure in a couple of those games, right? And, for Milwaukee, same deal. But for me, the Brewers' bullpen is just so good as well, comparatively speaking to Arizona. I mean, Devin Williams looks like the Devin Williams of old, and yeah, a couple other guys in there who have stepped up throughout the year in bigger spots, So I'm on Milwaukee in that series.
Yeah, I think the Brewers win the series. I will be rooting for Arizona, but they've been way too inconsistent for me to think that they're going to win this series. Um, so yeah, I think it's going to be Brewers, Dodgers, Phillies, Braves for the DS,
Yeah,
NLDS.
yeah. I know maybe we can do this more on Friday, but like I see the World Series being Baltimore Milwaukee. Be kind of a that's who my pick for the World Series is. I think it'd be a fun matchup for baseball people. Probably not what the networks are hoping for, or maybe even the league is outright hoping for, but we're baseball people around here at our core, so that's what I think anyway.
Yeah, I would like because the Mariners are out. It sucks. I can't believe
Yeah,
they didn't make it. Orioles definitely for the American League. I don't want to see any Texas teams in it. No AL East teams, and that's all there is basically besides the Twins. So give me Orioles, Braves, or Orioles, Phillies.
how about that?
Because I know the Phillies are going to beat the Marlins. I wish the Marlins had a better bullpen and could make it that far, but they're just not going to. So yeah, I actually don't know what I would prefer either. Because I like watching the Braves. Their offense is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I think the Orioles' offense is pretty damn good too. So that would be quite the World Series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there.
And I don't even want to pick a winner. I would be happy for those teams.
All right, that's fair. But I'll pin you on more picks though on Friday when we have the divisional matchups figured out. We'll talk about those a little bit and any other headlines that kind of pop up. So just a reminder for that again, be Friday instead of Thursday this week for our late week edition of Concrete Jungle. Kyle, anything big on tap this week? I know. Well, you at least get a couple things off your plate here for a couple weeks before adding the Sabres back in full time here. Although that's we're in single digits now for the Sabres, right?
Yeah, well, actually 10 days. But hockey actually starts before the 10 days. That starts at Tuesday, so 8 days tomorrow, a week from tomorrow, it starts. So, of course, I'll be all in on that. But, yeah, Yankees, Mets, kind of glad it's over in terms of writing and all that. 162 games every day, every night.
Plus, because you're doing both, that is
a lot of games.
What that is for? Wait, no, that's 320.
I'm bad at math.
322? No, 324. 324 different articles you had to do for each team for the
And
team.
then all the news, and man, it's a lot. And I'm just glad it's over because it's not fun doing it when they're losing.
Right.
And last year was the exact opposite. The Mets were great. The Yankees, were a playoff team. So hopefully somehow that changes next year. But I'm not sure it does with the Mets.
You kill it though. You're the man for it.
And we got the Bills in London this week, and that's going to be a little different. It's been, since 2016, 2017, since the Bills last played in London. So that's going to be different.
Hey, we got Bills Weekly coming up here in just a moment, live as well. So make sure if you don't already listen to that because we do preview that game coming up. And I have an interesting question we'll pose to our group during that about it. So
yeah, it was I would say shocking is the word, and the way the Bills won yesterday.
Yeah. So spare your thoughts then for in a little bit, and until then, be sure everybody you like, share, subscribe, all the fun stuff. YouTube, come follow us on TikTok and F1 Sports. We probably one of our last few truly quiet weekends over on the TikTok there for a little bit here because hockey coming up. You kill the highlights there. And you had one take off again with Bernard, so
It's all I do is laugh. I go back on TikTok an hour later and it's got 10K views. It's like, man, what is up with everyone loves the hockey coverage, I guess. So if that's the case, I think the TikTok's going to take off coming this. We're in October,
right?
In a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure to follow.
For sure. All right, appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll talk again on Friday, everybody. See you then.